Hey, gorgeous! Welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast with Holly Wharton, which combines powerful strategies on how to upgrade your business mindset along with practical business tips to grow your business. This podcast features solo shows with Holly and also interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now, here's your host, Holly Wharton.
Hello and welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast, episode 180. This is your host, Holly Wharton. I'm here with today's special guest, Katie Wyatt. Katie has been obsessed with the podcast platform to build businesses since launching her own successful podcast, The Wellness Entrepreneur, in late 2015. She now has 2 podcasts. She co-hosts Lady Boss Chats with collaborator Elle Roberts and helps entrepreneurs to conceptualize, create, launch, and grow podcasts that grow their business. She facilitates a vibing Facebook community over at bit.ly/Start Grow Thrive. If you want to connect with the tribe of like-minded biz babes, get over there. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to building a Raving community who love what you do. And I think this is really, really exciting because I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. And I love the way Katie has done this around her podcast. So welcome, Katie.
Oh, thank you so much, Holly. It's so cool to be talking to you.
Yay! Yay! So let's talk a little bit about your background and your business journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. So look, I started my online business at the end of 2014, beginning of 2015, but my background has always been in business, but a very different style of business. You know, I was in big corporate, HR, change management, project management, all that kind of good stuff. And I then moved into social enterprise, which is like just businesses that are trading for a social mission, which really appeals to me. I really kind of like to be driven by a purpose that's bigger than money. And yeah, started my business, it's coming up to 2 years ago, and decided to kind of think about business coaching and working with other entrepreneurs, given that's sort of my background. And I, at the same time, started a podcast and just fell in love with the podcasting platform, as I know you are too. Yes. You're like, episode 180, like How cool is that? and that sort of presented an opportunity for me, because I think when I started, there were still a lot of people interested in the platform, just hearing about the platform, but not really knowing how it could benefit them in building their brand. And so my business kind of took a whole new direction in helping people with, using podcasting as a key platform within their business.
So how did you manage to be so successful so quickly with your podcast? Because I think that's something that a lot of new podcasters really struggle with. It's hard to kind of build that following, and it's really easy to get lost among all the other podcasts out there.
Oh, look, it so is. And it's, I think you raise a really good point. And I think the more popular that podcasting gets, it's like blogging, blogging, 10 years ago, where if you were first to do it, you kind of got noticed because there was no one else around, whereas now we have to work a lot harder. And I think what helped me is that my podcast, The Wellness Entrepreneur, it was quite, it sort of demonstrates in the title its niche, that it's about wellness businesses. And there wasn't really, I couldn't find anything at the time. I think I found one other podcast at the time that was really niching around exactly the same topic. Now there's a ton more, but at the time there was very few. So I think that niching helped. Mm-hmm. And then, really the key to a successful podcast is good content and then good marketing. I was at a podcasting conference on the weekend and somebody said, and I think it's so true, we sometimes think the work finishes when we, stop recording, but actually that's when the work begins with getting the word out there about our show.
So what all do you do to promote your episodes?
Oh, well, I've tried lots of different things. I'm a big user of social media, so I share episodes everywhere, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert at that. There's a lot I want to do but just haven't kind of had the time to, but lots of big plans. And I've found Facebook groups incredibly effective, so promoting in my own Facebook group and promoting in other people's Facebook groups, when it's a promotion day or promo post, has really helped, because I think as there becomes more and more podcasts to choose from, people are coming back more and more to wanting a referral from a friend. So, we all want, as podcasters, reviews in iTunes, but the fact is I would rather somebody tells their friend to listen to me, because I actually think that's going to have, more weight than a review in iTunes.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So have you built a Facebook group around your podcast so that your listeners can kind of get together and stay in touch in between episodes, or how have you built a community around that?
Yeah, look, I started the Facebook group about 6 months after the podcast, and it was very much similar name, intended to be about a place to bring my audience so that I could engage with them, because I realized really quickly with podcasting, this was my experience, I would see these download numbers and I was like, who are these people? Yes. I want to talk to them. I want to know how they found me and what they're enjoying about the show. So that was really where I started with the group. But it has become, I've seen very different examples where some people will only let listeners into their Facebook group, so that's very much only promoted on their show. I really am targeting my whole target market to come and join my Facebook group. They won't all have listened to my podcast, but hopefully I can get them over to the podcast once they're in the group.
So is podcasting now your main form of content creation?
Yeah, I would say it is, because I do the podcast episode, I create content around the podcast episode, apart from, just doing lots of posts on Facebook and Twitter that are not just promoting content. Yeah, definitely, because it does, I think with one piece of audio, if you really put the time and effort on it, you can create so many pieces of content from one interview. So there's really no need to create anything else.
I love that. So what kinds of things do you create around each episode? Is it mostly social media posts and kind of conversation starters?
Yeah, so social media posts. So I use Canva, which we all love in this online world. I've got templates in there that I create quotes and imagery to share, photos of my guest, but with it in my branding to promote episodes. I also create a blog post from the show notes, so that I'm getting that written SEO online versus just the podcast. I'll create Pinterest posts. My goal, actually, I'm just talking to a team member about starting this shortly, is to also turn my podcast interviews into YouTube videos, because people on YouTube, they're not listening to podcasts and vice versa. So there's a real opportunity there, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I was doing that consistently for a long time in the beginning of my podcast, and then I just kind of stopped.
Really? Did you find it was useful?
A little bit. I mean, I was definitely getting views there for some of the videos, but I do think it raised awareness to the podcast. And since then, I've rebranded my podcast a couple of times, and I really want to start doing that again on my newish YouTube channel, because I do think it will raise awareness for the podcast and just get some listens on its own on YouTube. So yeah, I definitely think that's a great idea.
Fantastic.
So we're here to talk a little bit about how to build a raving community who love what you do. And I know we've kind of started talking about that, but like I said, this is something that's really challenging for a lot of entrepreneurs. So tell us a little bit about what your top tips are on how to build this raving community of fans.
Yeah, sure. So when I started even my podcast and my business, I really struggled with this concept of a community of raving fans as well. Like, you hear about it, Seth Godin talks about it, many other people talk about the whole concept of community building, but it was a bit like, well, how how do you do that? How do you find these people? And, you know, a lot of the conversation, I think, at that point was really around list building and having your list be your raving fans. And I always believe it all comes back to the list eventually. But I found that in the early days of business is quite challenging because you're a bit like, well, how do I find these people? Where do I go? So I found that the platform of the Facebook group worked really well for me. Mm-hmm. There's lots of other places. Some people find that community vibe on Instagram. There's, you know, other social platforms that can build that for you. But yeah, I started my Facebook group, and that really changed things for me because I began to realize that I was building this community. I was very deliberately creating a culture and a vibe. The way that you would think about organizational culture was how I approached the community feel of my Facebook group. And I think we've all been in multiple Facebook groups that we probably think, yuck, never coming back there, or it's spammy, or it's just, you know, very, aggressive or not very nurturing. So I knew exactly what I didn't want my group to be like, really focused on building a place that felt supportive and fun, and there was always something going on. It was active. And look, I think in really reflecting on what it is that makes, you know, bonds a community together, I think leadership is obviously a big part of it. And that's not leadership this is all about me because this is my group leadership. It's somebody that actually stands for something that people kind of want to hear from, that they feel articulates a lot of what's going on for them, but also that shared leadership model where the leader is actually very, very aware of acknowledging the other leaders within the group, because I think that really is what makes a really, you know, thriving community. And then, so then that connection to each other, I think, is just as important. I don't know if your listeners have started a Facebook group, I'm sure they had the experience I had where in the early days you feel like it's just you talking to you. And, you know, you might have a conversation with one person and it's like, oh, where is everybody? And I found that if you can tag people and bring them into a conversation because, I don't know, somebody asked a question about blogging, so you tag someone in the group that you know their expertise is blogging, that can help really lift the vibe and really tell people this is not just about me. I want to recognize everyone's strengths. And then the people that you tag in those situations, they'll just love you forever because you've acknowledged and recognized them for what they do.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that's also a way of kind of building conversation with people and kind of not dragging people to the conversation, but inviting them to participate because you've called them out as someone who can help on this.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And, you know, even I see a lot of people, and I think this is really nice, who when you join a new group, people will tag you instantly. And I think I don't do it anymore because my group's kind of gotten a bit too big, but I did love it when I did do it, because when somebody joins a group, you know, there's so many groups now competing for our attention. If you kind of don't get them in those first few minutes or hours of them joining, then you probably won't see them again.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting point. I resisted Facebook groups for so long because I was in so many and I just didn't participate in them very much. And I'd never really found one that kind of felt like home and that I really loved. And so I really resisted starting my own. And then I finally did. It was like something just clicked and I thought, it's time. So I did. And my group is still really small. And I've got a couple of kind of core, really active people and lots of silent people. So I'm still kind of finding the flow and that kind of thing. But I think I agree. It's so important when someone first joins to tag them and welcome them and you know, at least invite them with their name into the conversation so that they feel welcomed. And, you know, whether they choose to respond or not is totally up to them. And of course, the more they participate, the more they're going to get out of the group.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you've hit on something that is really important, that we all kind of do that. Oh, but there's a Facebook group for everything. Does it really need me to start one? But if you can't find the perfect place for you, then it's likely there's a whole lot of other people that are still feeling like they're looking for that perfect group as well. So I don't think, I don't think it's a reason not to do it just because lots of other people are doing it. Lots of other people are doing it badly.
Yeah. And lots of other people are doing it their way, and your way is going to be totally different from someone else's way. So I think, each individual has their own energy and their style and the way they hold space and the way they hold a group. And it's going to be different just by default because everyone is different.
Yes, totally. And I think as long as you're clear on why you're doing it, then that comes through in everything that you're talking about. And if you have theme days, what those theme days are about, then you're really kind of building a platform that sits outside of yourself, and people are either going to connect with that or they won't.
Yeah, exactly. As with everything you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
in fact, it's good, I think, to not appeal to everybody.
Oh, yes, I totally
then we're
agree.
just boring.
I know it's just such an easy trap to fall into when you're a new entrepreneur, because it's like, I don't want people not to like me. And it's like, well, it's okay for people not to like you. And it's okay for people to be kind of like, about you. Because who you want to be attracting and building is the community of people who love what you do.
Totally, 100%. I don't know where I heard this. It must have been on somebody's podcast. And they said, it's like a magnet. If you want to attract people, part of you has to repel others.
Yes.
And I was like, yes, that is 100% it.
I love that. So how did you go about when you were trying to build this raving community around what you do and your podcast and your business and everything? How did you go about highlighting the things about you that were different and allowing yourself to really play up those parts to attract the right people for you?
Look, I think in the first instance, what it really came back to was being comfortable in sharing who I was online. Mm-hmm. So, even if it's as simple as sharing a selfie, which 2 years ago I would never have shared selfies all over the internet, and now there's selfies every day, which I think we can have a perception of people that take selfies, but the fact is, if you're showing your face and the real you, not the branded headshot you, people will connect with that. And so I would have, in the early days, and even still, I would have theme days in my group that really encouraged people to share what was behind their business. So whether it's about their why or the self-talk that they're struggling with, the mindset stuff they're struggling with, really that invitation to open up. Yes. And go a bit deeper than just what I'm doing, what I'm marketing this week. And that, that worked both for me in terms of people connecting with me, but also helped the group really come alive, because it was that safe place where we could talk about that stuff and be, get support from each other.
Yes, I think that is such an important thing to call out. And one of the things that I've found, I'm still kind of feeling around with my theme days, and I feel like I need to make some shifts. But one of the things that I found to be a great conversation starter is when I share my own challenges, growth points, transformation, mindset stuff, stuff that I'm going through, and not from a place of like, oh my God, crisis, but a place of, I'm experiencing this is the stuff that's going through my mind. Is anyone else experiencing anything like this? And it's amazing how many people are like, oh my God, you read my mind. I'm going through the exact same thing. So when you share this deep stuff, like not the perfect, I'm all shiny and headshotty, but when you're sharing the inner stuff online and you invite people to, communicate with you and share their experiences, it's amazing how many people are going through the same thing at the same time.
Oh, totally. There is never one block that we as entrepreneurs are battling with that somebody else isn't feeling too.
Yeah.
I think, and even if they're not, that vulnerability, I think, invites people to connect anyway and say, I've been there before, or I'm sure I'll be there in the future. So I think as long as you feel safe in the environment that you're in. Like I wouldn't put it on my personal page,
No.
but I'll do it in the groups where I feel safe and supported and trusted.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point. I share a lot of stuff in my private Facebook group that I would never share on my personal profile or my business page because it's a closed community. I know who's in there. It's still a small group. And I've built and I'm trying to build and I'm trying to grow the type of community where that kind of stuff is safe. So I definitely feel safer saying stuff there that I wouldn't say elsewhere online.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like once you do have that community, whether it's small or big or whatever, it does invite a level of sharing that I don't even think we're used to doing in our personal lives. It's it sometimes surprises me. You know, I've been doing it, well, it feels like a long time, only 2 years, but it kind of always stops me to think, oh gosh, you know, I had twins earlier this year and my Facebook group was one of the first places I announced it.
Wow.
I was like, wow, that is kind of amazing.
And have you thought about doing like an offline meetup group that's maybe related to your Facebook group? Or do you have people from all over the world and it wouldn't make sense to do that?
Oh, look, the majority of my audience are in Australia, although we do have people, you know, UK, US, as, you know, I'm sure you do, the usual countries. But I have done a few meetups, so just like a coffee date here in Melbourne. I think it's a really lovely thing to do, you know, bring people together and get to know people in person. It's actually one of the things that's on my plan for the next 6 months, really, is to do a lot more of in-person connecting. If I have a chance to have a coffee with somebody, just doing it. So, yeah, I really want to kind of build those personal relationships.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to bring those online relationships offline. I mean, I recently met up in London with an online friend whom I've known for a couple of years now. And we've Skyped a lot over the last couple of years. We do co-hosted podcast episodes together. And we had never met in real life, despite the fact that she lives near Manchester, which is not that far away. But we met up for the first time and it was like, oh my God, I can't believe there's not a computer in between us. You know, it was just so amazing to be sitting across from a table having lunch with this person. It was like, oh my God, you're real. You're not just digital.
Isn't that just divine though when that happens? I love that. Oh. My the Elle who I co-host Lady Boss Chats with, that we had exactly that same situation where we got to know each other online and then months later we met and we were like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we actually haven't met. I know you so well.
I know. I have so many online friends like that. So yes, I think there is I love connecting online and I have so many amazing people that I've met online and have developed relationships with online, but it's so special to actually meet those people in real life.
It really is. And even if, you know, and I think it's important just for the soul and for the heart, but it's also good for business because, you know, I know that when people meet me in person, they're much more likely to listen to my podcast or, you know, just be interested in something else that I'm doing. So it is good business sense too.
Yes. And I can't begin to tell you the number of times I've been at an offline event and I've been talking to people or people that I just met and they've said, oh, your voice sounds really familiar. What do you do? and then I'll give them my card or I'll tell them who they are and they're like, oh my God, I listened to your podcast. And it's like they've listened to my podcast, but they've never met me in real life, but they recognize my voice. There's such a power in that. It's amazing.
It is so amazing. I love that. I remember, you know, when somebody first came up to me in an event and I got a hug. I got my first hug from a listener and it was so cool. But yeah, it reminds you that all this work we put into our shows, that people are listening on the other side. Yeah. And that's, it's a beautiful thing.
And that's just, you know, your listeners are part of your community.
Yes, totally.
Even if you can't see them.
Exactly. Like the show wouldn't exist without them.
Exactly. So, Katie, do you have any women business mentors? Are there any women entrepreneurs who inspire you?
Oh, gosh. Look, I've always really loved Amy Porterfield because she's just amazing, and I consider her my teacher, not my mentor, because whenever I want to know something about something, I go and listen to her podcast because they're like comprehensive, in-depth training, and I love that. Look, I'm also, I'm actually kind of following some podcasters now who I'm learning a lot from, both on the craft of the podcasting, because that's a really important thing to me right now, but also the way that they use the podcast in their business. So, for example, Natalie Ekdahl, who hosts the Biz Chicks podcast, and I love Elsie and Jess that host She Podcasts. But, I mean, there's so many amazing women in podcasting right now. It's just so exciting. Like, if you ever want to be inspired by women doing great things, just look at the podcast.
Yes, and I think that's so interesting because one of the reasons I started my podcast back in 2013 was because I couldn't find a podcast that had what I wanted, which was interviews with all women entrepreneurs. A lot of the podcasts were like mostly men, few women here and there, but I wanted to just hear women's voices, and I couldn't find that. And that's why I started my podcast, because I couldn't find it. And now I think it's so amazing how many women are showing up and, sharing their story with other women and creating these amazing stories online through podcasting.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you did, because I think you were the first of the wave of women coming into the industry. And even, you look at the charts in business, and there's still loads of men, mostly men, in the top of the charts. Yeah. And I still think there's a long way to go before a lot of people get over this need to think that, that they kind of, even when I see women do roundup blog posts of the top 25 podcasts you should be listening to as an entrepreneur, and there'll be one woman in there.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Really? Like, you don't listen to any more women?
Yeah, exactly. So, I think there's a long way to go, but it's so good to see how many are there, and they're just doing brilliant things. Like, I love Tara Gentile's podcast, The Power Profit Pursuit, I think it's called. I think she's amazing. She's another amazing woman that I've kind of recently fallen in love with, and would say, online mentor, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, she's fantastic. So, Katie, how can other women entrepreneurs who are listening to the show work with you?
Oh, well, look, I think the best way would be to connect with me first, and then, definitely through the Facebook group. And I currently work with people one-on-one, and I also have my podcast training program, and soon to be an ongoing membership community. And they're sort of the key ways at the moment that I'm working with people.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit more about your podcast program. Is this for new podcasters, established podcasters who want to do better and get more downloads? What is that about?
Yeah, so the course is for the newbie, the new sort of DIYer that wants to learn everything from go to woe. So how to even conceptualize what your podcast should be about, how it links to your business, how to produce it, edit it, get it into iTunes, grow it, all of that. So it's the go to woe. And then I am definitely going to start doing some stuff for the existing podcaster, because I'm in a podcaster's mastermind, and it's just incredible for that accountability and motivation and ideas for growth, because I think we all, need that every now and then. So I can see myself doing something similar, offering something similar. But at the moment, the course is definitely for the newbie. But I also help people that just don't, as I did. I didn't want to think about the editing, so I outsourced.
Me too.
I also kind of have a connected team of people that can do all of those types of services as well.
Excellent. So, Katie, where can people find you online? I know you've got your Facebook group, and we'll, of course, share the link to that in the show notes, but what are your favorite social networks to hang out on?
Look, I'm on Twitter quite a bit. I find it's fun for connecting with people, although I did just read an article in Inc.com that said all of our Twitter accounts will be deleted within the next 6 months because it's dying. So I'm feeling a bit sad about that. But definitely Facebook and Twitter, and then my website, which is just katiewyatt.me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I loved chatting with you about podcasting and about building a raving community of fans because I think, like I said, major challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs, and it's so, so, so important if you want to have a successful business and actually make money.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me, Holly. This has been heaps of fun.
Yay! Thank you for listening. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/180 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Business Mindset Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed at hollywharton.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave a quick review of this podcast. It just takes a minute. Thank you.